board members coming for our yearly budget presentation. Dan's passing out papers. We're going to do the budget presentation first, and then, excuse me, then the township will meet together, and then we'll come back and make a final decision before we have a regular meeting. That way, if the board members want to leave, they can, and if you want to stay in it, you can, either way, So as of now, are you ready?
Sure.
Okay.
That's not what we planned on watching. All right. Several handouts that kind of go along with some of the things that we'll talk about. The colored page is the budget from 2013 through 2022. Last year was my first budget presentation, and I asked for a few different line items. If you go through the budget pages, if it is on the left, if it's an orange box when the rest of the boxes aren't orange, those are the new line items that were approved last year with an increase that are put into the 2021 budget. So I left that color just so you can kind of see where those changes are. On the back page of the budget, or last page of the budget worksheet, should be the tax revenue information for the last couple of years, based on what I have for the 427, and then also for the 428 capital fund. On the bottom is another yellow, different color yellow line, and that's the insurance billing line item that we had added last year, so it's identified on the bottom. And I'll try to keep it on track and move it along. As it relates to the colored budget that you have, the 427 budget, so any of the line item codes on the left to start with 427 is considered our operating budget, so that's what we pay. Everything from our clothing allowance and our fuel to our fire hoses and anything that we need, gas, water, utilities, comes out of our 427 sections, which is the first pretty much 2 pages of the budget report that you have. The 428 is our capital outlay budget, so that's our bigger improvements items. So if we're going to spend over $5,000 on a piece of equipment, or several pieces of equipment, like several sets of bunker gear, then we can take it out of the capital outlay or the 428 type budget. Again, anything over $5,000 goes to the board first, and they get their approval, and then they tell me whether or not we can buy it. So the 275 is the last page, that yellow line that goes into our insurance or our fire run billing. So our fire run billing is set how much we can, actually, sorry. What have we done since the first budget that you guys approved for me? So in the last 18 months, last year was my first year's chief, and in the first 6 months this year we've spent a lot of the money on updating some things. We replaced 9 sets of outdated turnout gear. Each set of turnout gear is like $2,700 for coat and pants. We've replaced all 3 of our thermal imaging cameras. They're about $7,000 or $8,000 a piece. We have a phone in the fire station, and we did not before, but we paid for 2 phone lines. So now we have an actual phone, and we pay less. So felt like that was a good bullet point. We have a new 4-gas detector, so carbon monoxide alarms go off, or we have gas leaks. We use that 4-gas detector to replace some of our old ones. We were able to 2 automatic defibrillators on a grant. We got garage door openers. I feel like that's important because during fire, you can leave in the middle of winter, it's 13 degrees outside, and, you know, just trying to get to the fire, so you don't stop on the apron and have someone get out, and then all the heat leaves the building, but we could be gone for hours. So we got garage door openers. We've made several updates to our 800 megahertz radio system, including 9 new radios. We have had several from other agencies within the county that were donated to us to use. So we have an 800 megahertz radio in just about every firefighter's hand, like personal radio that they carry with them, so they have it to respond to fires or to report things if there's an emergency. So we have to continue working on increasing that so everybody has one. And then we now have 800 megahertz portable radios mounted in every truck. This is, I think, a little earlier to do a budget presentation during the year than normal. So we still have quite a bit of money left in our 2021 approved budget to work on. We are going to start updating. We've made a pretty good dent in the outdated fire gear. We need to start replacing boots. So if we do about 10 or 12 sets a year, then it would only take a year or two to get those updated. So I would like to still buy boots this year. I submitted for a wildland firefighting grant. It's a 50% match grant. You know, we got the new brush truck out there, and it's ready to go. We could use some equipment for it, so I have a list of about $3,300 worth of stuff that would be wildland specific. If we got that grant through the Department of Natural Resources, we would only owe $1,400. So I'll apply for that grant and find out in August if we get that. The last couple fires, we've had some pretty good wear and tear on some of our initial attack lines, so I'd like to put an order together still this year with budgeted money to replace some of that. We have 2 more gas detectors to replace, so they're all up to date and current, and we would like to get a combustible gas detector. I've submitted for a grant for those through Homeland Security, through the state Homeland Security, which is a 100% grant, so we don't owe anything if we get that grant. It's up to $4,000 that we get. Still this year, I would like to use funds to try to replace up to 10 of the 800 megahertz radios. Like I said, we were given donation ones from other agencies, but that was because they got new ones and we got their old ones. So they're still old, they work for us, but they don't make parts for them anymore. So we still need to continue to try to replace those with newer things, and that's one of the things on the to-do list. We need to probably look into replacing one of our tankers' portable pumps, and on the capital improvement plan for 2021 that was developed in 2018 was to have a repeater tower here locally at the fire station. So starting with our 427 fund, which is really part of the most part of the budget presentation or proposal, is the 427 fund. So the historic data on our cash revenue for the 427 fund, you can see that it went way down in 2020. There's a form, we have a 2-sided form for should. That says 2019, it's kind of cut off at the top, and the back side is 2020. So the biggest decrease in funds there was the property tax, the first line item on that from 2019 to 2020. And I asked the clerk's office about it. They said that was COVID related. That was a decrease.
The 2 years that you're going back to, I think, has a lot to do with property tax too. I think that increased lots of revenue.
So it did go down some there, and we'll look at other things that could go into increasing those funds or trying to keep that up to what we need to have it at to continue to spend or provide the services that we do. not looking to change anything or ask for anything more on our budget like I did last year. I'm looking to keep most of the line items that you looked at in the 2022 column the same. There are two that I have on the second sheet that are highlighted in yellow. And those are my two changes that I know that we can make. They're decreases based on some of the most recent bills. So the telephone, now that we have that system updated with internet phones, we can take $1,000 out of that. And based on our previous gas usage, like natural gas for heating, I feel like we can get rid of $500 out of that line item. And I didn't replug that stuff in anywhere else. Like, we could just, those would be reductions on the budget. It's, I feel like it's early in the year to be able to say, I would like to use, I guess, more than a year and a half of data before I say, hey, we can cut our diesel fuel budget by this much, or we can cut our water bill by this much. Even though we typically overestimate how much we need for that. So there should be money left unspent in the budget just because those line items are high to start with. I added we talked about and added this last year, which was the firefighter run pay. And it is under line item on the front page at $15,000. So that is a point system where the firefighter shows up for a run. At the end of the year, based on how many firefighters showed up for how many runs, they get 1 point for each run, and then divide that by. It's $15,000 in here. I'm using it based off of $14,000 because we have to pay the tax. I don't know what taxes we pay for each person, you know, like the payroll tax, I'm sorry, like whatever the payroll tax is. So I didn't.
Oh, you're fighting there.
Yeah, so I didn't incorporate the whole $15,000 in the going out to the firemen. I took back what we would need to hold back for taxes. So as an example, for last year, it came to be like $13.60 per run that a firefighter made, based on, we had about 1,059 points. So about 172 calls, and then you add how many firemen showed to each call. And the computer system tells us how many points that was. So each fireman would get paid, if we had this in 2020, $13.62 per call. So sometimes calls only last 20 minutes, which is great. Sometimes they last 5 hours. You know, so like there's the offset, how that's somewhat justified. So there's using $14,000, $13.29 a point, out of 1,053 points. So, for example, the top 3 most active firemen would have made an extra $1,422, then down, you know, as it goes down. So the top guy showed up to like 144 calls out of 170. So that's why he would make the most. The guy that shows up to 20 calls a year would get 20 times $13.59. So it's just a way to hopefully incentivize participation. So everybody shows up for the structure fire. That's fun, I guess, to hear firemen. It doesn't sound good to the public, right? But you know, that's why everyone wants to be a fireman, is for that structure fire. We get participation there, but we need people to show up to the carbon monoxide call at 2 in the morning. You know, so we need something to incentivize them to get out of bed and respond to the station to help the community. So that's what the firefighter run pay is about. .428 historical data is the go to the last page. The 428 stuff is in there. The way I have it from last year's spreadsheet, instead of having a line item for turnout gear and a line item for fire equipment, each for $6,000, it's actually just in the bottom line item, that's capital expenditures. So there's actually, the $52,000 is all in that line item. So it could be spent on any of those items in there, and it's not separated. So $52,000, last year, or the 2020 tax revenue actually went up from 2019, so of the $64,200 that we received in revenue for that, we spent, or budgeted to spend $52,000. So, except for last year in the 427, each time we do a budget, we spend less than what we budget for less than what the revenue is. So all of the money that we don't spend in either of the budgets stays within the agency. So if we're looking to buy a new engine down the road, we have $300,000 or $400,000 of unspent money from years prior, it's sitting in there. So we don't lose it, it doesn't default back to the state general fund or anything like that, it stays within the agency. And we save that for emergencies or large scale purposes. I'm not looking to make any adjustments to the 428 budget. So there should be a capital improvement form you guys have. It's actually on a regular size sheet of paper, but it came from this larger sheet of paper, so it's got several lines across it. It might still be on the top.
Recess.
No way. Then they'll accuse me of editing things out. Then they'll accuse me of editing things out. So we don't stop it, we don't edit it.
Was still on the copy.
Thank you. Did you want one of these? No.
Okay, so, capital improvement plan, is supposed to project long-term, large-scale items. The, capital improvement plan that is on file, when I took this position, was, made back in 2017. So, I've been trying to go through it and determine what's still valid or accurate, and then what we need to do
You want me to come?
moving forward. So, if you look at that,
Can't make eye
we would
on this one.
take money out of our allotment of capital improvement funds each year and hold that money back, knowing that we're gonna have to spend it on something larger. So, it says grass truck, we would need $102,400 in 2018 was the plan. Well, we've got a new grass truck, so all of that money that was potentially needed for that can be crossed off the list. 528, which is our small rescue truck, was proposed to replace that for $361,000. We're not doing that, so we can cross that off the list. If we are gonna replace the small rescue truck, which still works fine, we would probably get a pickup truck, and it would hold some rescue stuff, but our main engine also holds rescue stuff, so there's no reason, in my opinion, to have two really large trucks that do the same thing. So it's not in my intentions to use $361,000 to replace that. The building generator was purchased last year. Because of COVID, it's still on back order, but we have already funded that, it's paid for. So any money that's set in that line item to be saved or whatever is already done. I mentioned that the repeater tower is listed here to be purchased in 2021 for $10,000. That would be for this year. Currently, our repeater is on the Napa building tower. It's crooked. And Napa hasn't grown theirs, so we don't want it to be crooked. And just because it doesn't have a generator, it doesn't work if the power goes out, stuff like that, we would put probably like a 40-foot antenna tower heater, just like you would get for your house, nothing special. So I don't know that it would cost $10,000, but it would then be hooked up to our generator that we get, and it would be functional no matter what. It says that we would want to replace our fire engine in 2032, our second engine, for $350,000. That's a long ways out. I would not look for a custom fire engine like we have on our new one. I would rather buy a two-seater run-of-the-mill fire engine that meets the purpose that we need and isn't custom, so it's a lot cheaper than what we would pay for a custom one. You know, so it's our backup secondary engine, and it would meet our purposes without having to have all of the bells and whistles. But again, that's out to 2032. So the 2034, where it says SCBA replacement, I feel like our SCBA's that we have, probably we should be thinking about that now, as opposed to 2034. I think they were purchased back in like 2010. I'm just guessing. So they're 12 years old. They get probably the most abused of all the rest of the fire equipment. And they're the most relied upon by the firefighter because you can't breathe in the nastiness, so they keep you alive. There are other options that I'm going to talk about as far as SCBA replacement. There's no date for the 800 megahertz replacement, but it's on the list. Again, if I could do like between 6 and 10 a year, then we're keeping up with what I feel is good on that capital plan. And then the ladder is pushed out to 2034. That's kind of a long way off, so we'll leave that for other talks. Again, for 2022, I would like to stay on the capital plan at the 52,000. Again, we made 64,000 in revenue, so we're still in the black there by 12,000, a little bit over $12,000. I mentioned the air packs. Next year, I would like to apply for the Assistance to Firefighters grant. It's a federal firefighting grant where they pay for firefighter safety and upgrades, anything from fire stations to flashlights. It's a wide swath. The Assistance to Firefighter grant, the amount that the agency pays is based upon the population of the area that we cover. Based on our population, our match would be 5%. So the air packs, to replace all of them, 30 of them, is about $275,000, and our share would be $15,000 of that. So my proposal for the 428 budget is to hold $15,000 or assign $15,000 of that to that match in hopes that we get the grant. If we don't get that grant, we can allocate the $15,000 as a whole, for when we do have the ability to buy some air packs. So that would be the first $15,000 out of the 52. I would like to continue with gear replacement. It's NFPA, set by NFPA guidelines that the gear is replaced every 10 years. If I could get 5 more sets next year, that would keep us on par with our rotation to keep the gear in compliance with those standards. So that would be $14,000. The remaining of the budgeted money for the 428 would be to continue with the radio updates, and whatever's left, which I estimated to be about $23,000. So all of those estimates are higher than what the vendor said they would be. And I put it that way because who knows how much stuff will cost next year, and after like shipping or you need batteries to go with whatever, I just estimated high. but it's still within the $52,000 budgeted line item on that. So the 275 fund is the last, or third to last line on that budget, and that's new to us as it relates to having money available to spend. And remember I said we were gonna try to figure out how we can offset the lower revenue and still be able to provide the same service to the community. So when we bill for fire runs, gas leaks, crashes, and we're able to do that. It's set by statute. And the amount that we bill is also set by the state fire marshal's office. We can't just say, we wanna bill somebody this much money because this took us longer to do, whatever the project is. It's set by statute how much we can bill. So each truck is assigned a value based on statute. How much we can charge by hour is set by statute. Again, these are things that we've talked about before. We accept money. If you have insurance and your house catches fire and your insurance pays us, we take whatever they give us. Some insurance has a limit of $500 and the bill's $1,700. We take the $500 and we do not go back and ask the people to pay out of their pocket for the rest of it. So we take only what they give us. Now, I'm estimating what we have or will have in that account by 2022. We still have 6 months left in the year. We have about $13,000 or $14,000 in there now. So based on just projections, we should have $16,000 or more in that by January. The statute says that we're allowed to spend half of that in a given year. Okay, so that's why I have a line item budget for that run billing at $8,000 in the second to bottom line. Again, the $16,000 is projected. We can't spend anything out of it this year, so we know that it's only gonna go up. It's about $13,000 now. I foresee getting another $3,000 in it by the end of the year. So we're just projecting that we have $16,000, and I'm putting a line item in there for $8,000. We would use this to replace things that are damaged on the fire scene. Pagers, fire hose, flashlight, anything that's fire related, we can spend out of that account. So that is one way to offset some of the downturn in revenue. So, put the mortgage proposal in there. I talked about this last year. I have not heard back from Baker Tilly on the mortgage proposal. So, we have a mortgage payoff after this year's payment of $350,000, almost $351,000. To cover our mortgage when we bought the building and the building, we had to have some type of, I guess, collateral you'd call it. So we had to buy a CD for $400,000 to cover the amount of our loan. We cannot cash in the CD until we have a zero balance on our mortgage. So in 15 years, when we pay off our mortgage, we could cash in the CD and have that $400,000 back. If you look at our books, somewhere, if you were to look at our books, it would show that we have $760,000, just throwing out a number, $760,000 in our capital fund, because it incorporates that $400,000 CD. But ultimately, we couldn't touch it unless the mortgage balance was zero. Each year we spend $40,000 out of our operating budget to pay towards that mortgage. The actual payment is about $37,000. We pay $40,000 just to pay extra, try to put that down. And our interest is about $12,000 a year that we pay. So my proposal has been to use the CD to pay off the $350,000. That would leave us, $50,000 of money left in the CD. So we would have $64,000 remaining from the CD, because we have $14,000 in escrow account also tied to that. My proposal was also then to commit to not spending the $40,000 in that line item, to saving that money in that line item, not incorporating it back into the budget to spend on anything else for 3 years. Because there's concern, a valid concern, that we will never have that much money, that $400,000 coming back to us in 15 years. We would never have that much money in our account again. And my counter to that is, but in 3 years, we would have a saved amount of $184,000. Again, committing to not spending that for 2 years, or reincorporating that into our budget. Does that make sense? So why 3 years? What do we need in 3 years versus what do we need now? So our community needs us, but we need help. We have, our participation is kind of down. We're not getting any, we have a new guy we put on last month's meeting, but it's the day-to-day things. Again, if the tones go off and there's a structure fire right now, people would show up here. But there is a lot about operating a fire department besides getting on the truck and using the hose, you know. There's a lot of day-to-day things. So, there's a federal program out there called the SAFER Grant. It's about staffing. It's about assistance for fire departments, especially volunteer fire departments, where staffing and manpower and participation is low. A SAFER grant is a federal grant that they fund whatever positions for 3 years. So some departments that were in the, I looked at the chart of who got money last year. There were a couple of Indiana departments where they got $2 million for however many full-time guys on their department. So that would not work, because after 3 years, you have to fund it. You have to come up with that $1,000,000 to fund the positions that you asked for. And you're surely not gonna say, well, I mean, I guess it's happening not too far away. You're surely not gonna say, hey, we hired these firemen to help the community, but now we don't need them because we can't fund it. So what I'm looking for is a part-time basis, because then you don't have insurance, you don't have perf, stuff like that. To have a firefighter on station Monday through Friday from like 7 in the morning till 5 at night, so 10 hours during the day, Monday through Friday. And that would be somebody that could keep up on our reports. I've tried, and Justin's tried, Matt Wellborn has helped out with reports, and we just can't keep up, because we have other things like our regular paying jobs that we have to go to, you know. So our reports are 100% tied to being able to bill somebody for runs. If we don't have the report in the system, I can't send a bill and make money to fund some of the stuff in the operating budget. Our maintenance, if we didn't have Pat Clausen, honestly, all the tires would be flat, probably. You know what I mean? He is in here every day during the week, cleaning, checking valves, checking the tires, changing the wiring on whatever, and he does his best to keep up, but he's one guy. If we had somebody here from Monday through Friday, 7 to 5 for 10 hours, during the day when everybody's at work and we have fewer people to respond to calls, we would be guaranteed to have somebody that was trained to pump the trucks, to drive the trucks, to be ready to go out the door to handle the gas leak. I know that the mayor's vision is to bring more to Delphi, more businesses, more residential areas. Well, with that comes the responsibility that we haven't even touched in years, I would say, is to make sure that the buildings where people are living are up to code, that they're safe to reside in, that the businesses know that we have somebody that knows how to work their alarm system or their sprinkler system, And all of these things that are probably the fire department's responsibility that we can't keep up with. So that would be, what this person would do. So if we paid a guy $15 an hour, 10 hours a day, it comes to about $43,000 a year. That would include the payroll tax and stuff like that. So where would we come up with that money? The first 3 years would be the SAFER grant if we were awarded that, so that covers it. We would save the $40,000 a year, each year if we paid off the mortgage for 3 years, plus what's left in the CD. So that gets us out 6.5 years to come up with how do we continue to fund this on our own. You know what I mean? Like, the first 3 years, we need to come up with a plan. How do we fund this? The next 3 years are paid for because we've saved from our mortgage and I've identified where we come up with that $47,000 a year. So we're covered for 6.5 years. But if you look at several departments that are responsible for areas the size that we are, you'll find that most of them are combination departments that have several full-time or on-station personnel. So I am not asking for any money for this right now. I'm just letting you know what the benefit could be to paying out the mortgage, and that I'm interested, first, in your feedback, but second, in exploring the SAFER grant program as an option to move forward on that kind of plan. So I'm almost done, I promise. Some other grant opportunities that I'm looking for 2022, again, we talked about the Assistance to Firefighters grant. I want to really focus on replacing our air packs. Again, about $275,000. If we were to get that grant, we'd be responsible for $13,750, and I'm looking to save that back in our 428 this year, hoping that we get it, so that way that funding is already taken care of. The 2022 SAFER grant, which would be for that position, 3 years at that $43,000 a year would be about $129,000 grant. That's not a match. We don't have to match that. That's what the grant would provide to us. Would give us that 3 years to work on how we can continue working through that plan into our regular budget. The 2023 Homeland Security Foundation grant is money that's generated from those Secure Indiana license plates. You can choose to get different kind of license plates for your car, and if you choose this one, it costs an extra $25. All that money throughout the state goes to this grant. That's what we got the defibrillators on, and that's what we're trying to get the gas detectors on. So I would like to put in for that every year for something that's $4,000, $400,000 or less, just in hopes of getting that. And then, like I said, we put in for the forestry grant this year. We can do that every year. I think that's a 50% grant, and it would cost us probably around $1,200, hoping to get about $3,000 worth of equipment. So those are things moving forward, and that's what I have. So a ton of information. In a nutshell, I'm asking you to try to keep the budget as close to where it was last year as possible. The downside of that, I guess where I need your input or your suggestions, is that we did have a considerable decrease in revenue from last year going into this year. So we have a surplus. I'm not the kind of person that wants to spend the surplus. I want to try to save as much money as we can for big projects that we know every type of municipality or fire department has. So, but I also know that there's some places on here that we just can't cut. You know, we gotta put fuels in trucks. We gotta have our air packs tested every year. We gotta have our ladders tested every year. So any input or questions that you have, I will do my best to answer them or defer them to somebody who might be able to.
Back to your repeating tower. The tower at the sheriff's station, is there any, could we utilize
So the
that
sheriff's
tower?
department does not have a, tower, actually. The sheriff's department, pays for phone lines
Okay.
that tie their radios into the tower at, yeah, Prince William, I'm sorry, on 421. Drew a blank there for a minute.
All right, so the tower behind the building isn't a tower, it's.
There's nothing on the, yeah, there's,
nothing
no.
there.
So we have gone and we use the 800 megahertz system, so we're not using the VHF system as much, but I could give you 4 times in the last 8 months that the state system has gone down and we've had to go back to the VHF system. So if we were to just say totally we're no longer supporting VHF, there would be times where we would have no communication. So I think it's important to continue to at least support the main functions of it.
Since you stated you estimated high, have you researched what a tower would
So
typically cost?
I think when they proposed the $10,000 tower, it was kind of, the last one that they put up was out of Camp Tecumseh, for our west repeater, and it was, I think, 70 or 80 feet tall, and obviously bigger because of the height. Here in town, since we have a repeater out there, and there's one in Camden, we pretty much just need town coverage, so, I'm not saying the cheapest residential tower you can get is what we want, but, you know, something that's 45 or 50 feet tall that isn't as, expensive as what they probably quoted for the 80-foot tall one is why I think that that one's quoted high. I think we could do it for probably $6,000 or less. Again, a lot of information. I don't know if Leanne has any thoughts, or I'm open for a lot of experience that you have, so.
You presented it, sure, but
Right, but I,
I think
Yeah.
you've explained it well.
Leon and I were kind of talking a sidebar here, when we switched, to IFM, to the fiber, I don't think there is any charge, that has been coming to the fire territory, it would be minimal. I think we pay, what, 800 a month for IFM, maybe 5% of that, you know, would be fire territory, and it could be just in their telephone / internet, because they're coming, you know, to the same thing, so.
I think you paid Frontier, like, around $80 or $90 for your internet.
Right.
Yeah.
So you won't have that, and it would just be a, you know, small, or then bills you back for the phones, should be good, like 5% of that.
yeah, and part of that is I got the information, from your office the other day on the amount for the cell phone bill, and then $15 a phone, and then I added some to it, just knowing there would probably be fluctuations in there. So it wasn't set right at the minimum of, you know,
So you may have it come in.
right, that's correct.
Anybody else got any other questions for Dan?
I'm just gonna throw one out that,
Yep.
I don't know if people have asked, and may have answered before. On the whole mortgage deal. Okay, so you're saying it's 12,000 in interest that we're paying a year. What is the interest on that CD payment?
I forget, I just, the interest revenue in it right now, we had Security Federal paid the part they've been holding. Right now, we're showing you a 20,000 revenue, but right now I can't quote you the rate we're getting on it.
But the 20,000 revenue has been since we opened it.
It's also revenue this year too, though.
Right, so, but I mean, it's not like it's more than the interest per year on the loan itself. We're not making more on the CD than we're paying interest on the loan.
You should be coming pretty close to it.
It's a good question, but I'm sorry.
I cannot remember, there's too many, right, there's too many groups, I think.
I'm gonna ask that we take about 10 minutes and each township together with their group, talk it over, and then we'll come back as a whole and final approval, okay?
So what you're asking the townships though is to vote on this
on the 2022 column,
That's
on
correct.
the colored form.
So take a break, everybody get with their board members.
If you have questions, I will come around and answer whatever you have.
I mean, don't be afraid to ask, really.
No, so, it would be, yeah, so a lot of departments that do this, so it wouldn't just be people that are on the Delphi fire roster. First, you would have to have a certain level of if you're on camping fire,
Thanks.
or on a solar fire, and you have those certifications, and you wanna pick up a shift here for 10 hours, then you can work two, because you're off in the you know, so it would be, if it folks,
It would be a minimum of 2 people, if not more.
there's guys that are on